So I needed to go into town today to buy a couple of things for my flat. So I thought I'll take my little Fujifilm XF10 with me and take some photos along the way. Now I often do, whenever I'm out the house, I often do carry this in my pocket. But for the most part, especially when I'm sort of in town, in my hometown, Carlisle, for the most part it just stays in my pocket. But I thought this time I'm actually gonna get it out, put it around my wrist, and I'm gonna actually look and I'm gonna take some photos. And yeah, I've spoken on this channel recently how because of the pandemic and everything, I've just not been taking photos because I've been stuck in my hometown. And I used to live in London. Now London is a fantastic place for street photography. There's so many different places you can go. There's so many different people and you can easily blend into the background, and there's so much going on. It's a great place for street photography. So since I've moved back to my hometown, it's a very small town. I've always told myself I just can't do street photography here. Also, if you walk through town holding a camera, here you're gonna stand out more as opposed to London where you can easily blend into the background even if you are taking photos. Here it's a little bit more difficult, so I've always been very, very self-conscious taking photos here. I've always thought I'm much more likely to get into some sort of conflict here. I think people are more likely to react negatively if they see you taking photos of them. So for all those reasons, I've just always told myself I can't. This isn't a place where I can do street photography anyway. I need to be in a bigger city. In recent videos, I've spoke about this realization that I can't let this pandemic stop me. I need to get back into the habit of taking photos. So as I walked into town today, took my camera with me and just took some photos. Now it wasn't specifically a photo walk. I didn't spend a long time just looking for photos. I just went into town to do what I needed to do and then went back home. I just had my camera and took photos along that way. Now the photos that I took, I hate the photos. They're not good photos, but it wasn't about that. It was just the very fact that I did actually go out and take photos. And as I was doing so, I realised I've been telling myself this story all this time that this small town isn't a place for street photography. There's nothing to photograph. It's not interesting. It's too much of a small town with a small town mentality, and people are gonna come up to me and start fights with me or get angry with me if they see me taking photos. And all of that is not true. There was people today who actually saw me with my camera taking photos and they never said anything. There was no conflict at all. And I realized, you know what? If I actually went out specifically and took the time, there is definitely photos here I could take. And throughout this pandemic, I've also had the mindset of not really wanting to go into town and photograph, people with masks on and empty streets, and it hasn't really interested me. I've just thought, how interesting is a photograph with someone wearing a mask? Now that I actually went out and done it today, I thought actually maybe I do want to document this time in history. Maybe in years to come I will look back on these photos. And annoyingly, it's taken me till near the end of this pandemic to come to this realization, but probably I should have been going out and taking photos. So I have been guilty of telling myself a lot of stories. I need to be in a big city for street photography. And although I hate these photos that I've taken, like I say, it's not about that. It's about realizing that it doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter how small the town you live in is. 100% I can go out and take photos here, and if I took the time and the care into doing it, I 100% could get interesting street photos here. Because I've not been taking a lot of photos throughout this pandemic, street photography in particular, I've done very little, if any, throughout this pandemic. So I have lost a lot of confidence, I suppose, and I think that shows in these photos and the technique I've used in these photos. However, just actually taking a few photos didn't really matter whether or not they were good photos or how I took them. Just the very act of actually having it with me and pressing the shutter and looking, already it's given me so much confidence again and momentum and drive to actually get out and do it. So I'm really pleased for that. And again, I'm not gonna tell myself that story anymore, because I now realize if I actually put in the effort and specifically went out to look for photos and take photos, I could absolutely do it in this small town. And I know, because I've seen people say it, I've heard people say it, I know so many photographers, when they live in a small town, they tell themselves, I can't do it here because there's nothing interesting to photograph. I need to live in New York, I need to live in London. These are the places you need to be to do street photography. I can't do it in this small, boring town. But it's not true. I did take more photos than what I've shown in this video. These are the only ones that I'm reluctantly willing to show. And if nothing else, like I say, they do sort of document this time, and it is a point in history. Sometimes street photography, you can just get away with that, because years down the line, they will become interesting just solely for that reason. Aside from that, this photograph of the old woman, I think, is the one out of the lot that sort of has a bit more potential, in that she does look interesting to me. Her expression is interesting. What I don't like is that I'm too far away from her. I need to be closer for it to be a more interesting photo. I need to be, not necessarily right in her face, but I definitely need to be closer to make this a more interesting photo. Obviously I've just basically walked past her at a bit of a distance, raised my camera and pressed the shutter. So it's not a good photo for that reason, but I think it's the one out of the lot that would have potential if I was a bit more confident, putting a bit more care and thought. But yeah, just walking into town and spending 10-15 minutes taking 3 or 4 photos, just that alone has made me feel so much more confident about going out and doing it now, and realizing that I can do it here. I don't need to be in a big huge city. I can do it here and enjoy it just as much and see just as much if I'm just willing to actually do it. Finally, on a side note, just to end this video, for the regular viewers of my channel, in my last video I spoke about 2 things. Firstly, how someone at work had tested positive for coronavirus, and I was certain I was then gonna get coronavirus and catch it too. I'm pleased to say I'm perfectly fine. I haven't came down with coronavirus. I didn't catch it off him. I'm amazed I didn't, but I haven't, so that's good. Although part of me does think maybe I've already had it and just not had any of the major symptoms. You read about these symptoms, these lesser known symptoms and things, and I'm like, I've had that, so I don't know, maybe I've had it, maybe I've not. Secondly, I spoke about my roof and the marks I have on my wall and my ceiling from signs of water. Eventually I did get a roofer out, and he replaced a few slates on the roof, and he tells me I should be fine now. He tells me I don't have to worry about the marks on my walls or anything, so I guess I just have to take his word for it. So yeah, those two things I was worried about in my last video as well, perfectly fine. Everything's good now. So I guess if there's a moral to this video, it's that just don't worry. Everything's fine. Everything works out fine. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.